it's really the lens that you look at the scripture through that then defines everything. So, you know, under apartheid, we looked at scripture through the lens of the Tower of Babel, and that God separated people because that was God's intent. And so we created this system of apartness, which then we separated people into all these little apartnesses, and we had separate restaurants and separate schools and separate and separate and separate and separate and separate. And that was because that was God's design, because that was the lens that we viewed the whole thing through. And then if you change the lens and say, but Pentecost is about all these people understanding one language, even although they speak different languages, and it's this whole kind of togetherness, even although this Ubuntu-ness that kind of brings the whole thing together. Well, that's a very different lens. When you look at it through that lens, and you just see this whole narrative of God reconciling. But if you look at it through the other lens, you see this whole narrative of God separating. And it's the same thing for me. I had to go through that metamorphosis of looking at the world that I grew up in through a different lens in order to kind of, you know, live in a different way. And so in the same way here, people have grown up in churches and in communities and in families and in societies where the lens tells us that there's this hierarchical structure between men and women. And if we don't change the lens, we fundamentally can't see it. And, you know, I mean, that is the one thing I do kind of, you know, the piece of grace that we can give people is they don't see it because they fundamentally can't see it. They just can't see it. But the minute the lens changes, it's like, oh my goodness, how did I not see that?